Hello everyone, welcome back to the London Property Podcast. I am Marius Nazare.
I'm Chris Mulry.
And this is episode 24. And I'm going to start off with an article that just came out the other day. It's a report from Halifax, and they have indicated that the average UK house prices have increased by 5.2% this month. August essentially, we are in September now. Compared to August 2019, which is quite interesting because obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic still, yet prices on average have gone up compared to last year. And previously there's been a lot of negative news of how the property market is going to come down and the pandemic and it'll be absolutely dead, where we have this kind of article and we've seen on the ground the level of activity, especially for first-time buyers, has been incredible. And in comparison to August, right, it has been busier. And I think part of that is because obviously a lot of people are not able to go on holidays anymore. They're not able to go abroad. So, their obviously activity for looking for a property has increased in comparison to this time last year when we didn't have the pandemic. What's interesting about this report, obviously, it talks about how different cities in the UK have increased compared to this time last year. London on itself obviously only increased by 1%, which is quite interesting. But then if you break that down, London has so many micro markets. So like your prime central London where we operate is going to be different than the outer London regions. But they do kind of mention in the report that they expect this upward trend to stop once the furlough scheme ends. So it's kind of what we've been talking about, the actual true impact of COVID on the economy and unemployment levels once the furlough scheme actually ends and that support from the government stops. So they've obviously seen a big kind of flurry of activity, a lot more exchanges for the month of August, prices going up in certain regions, obviously by even up to like 5.2%. On average is 5.2%. In some cities like Nottingham have experienced like 4% growth compared to this time last year. So that's interesting, but they do have this kind of, line in there saying we do expect this upward trend to stop, which is pretty much what our opinion has been kind of for the last 3 months since we opened up. And it's an interesting article because it just shows that people are motivated to move. A lot of people's behavior about the pandemic, they're still cautious, but people are getting on with their lives really, and they're buying houses. August has been a very busy month in terms of exchanges because of the pent-up demand that we had, because of the lockdown. So there is a lot of positivity out there as well, but asterisk, like the thing is that you have to be kind of keeping an eye on what's going to happen in October, November, December, because I think that's when we'll start seeing a slowdown of this really positive movement. So what's your opinion on the whole situation?
I agree with you. I think towards the end of the year, the property market's seasonal anyway. During the year it's normally busy in the springtime, and obviously the springtime this year everyone was on lockdown. And then the summer's quiet, September gets busier again, we're in September right now. And then towards the end of the year, kind of October, November, December, the closer you get to December, obviously, seasonally, the nights, it gets darker earlier, the weather's kind of cold, everyone's preparing for Christmas. And, at that time of year, less people are likely to move, they kind of put it off generally until kind of spring next year. So, everything seems to be coinciding at the same time, with the withdrawal of the furlough coming up shortly, and then seasonally is going to be a quiet time. I guess the question is, will people really need to sell, or will they kind of be able to hold out? Because obviously the unemployment rate is going to go up quite a lot. We have had all this pent-up demand come through. So, we're not really economists, we're just kind of reporting on what's happening now, and the situation will be different towards the end of the year. And I think the sentiment will also change as well, depending on what happens with regards to the November budgets. with regards to at least on the investment side of residential property as well.
Yeah.
There's some positive news which is coming through from the government. They've gone into a consultation with regards to the planning system, and this is really positive news because it's completely unfit for purpose. As the government have kind of pointed out, nothing's been done for years. It's like, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But it kind of is at the point now that there is a housing crisis, shortage, and properties need to be developed. And I think we're one of the only countries in Europe that has a planning system like we do. Most countries throughout Europe, from what I understand, I'm no expert on the matter of planning, but from what I understand, it's more of a rules-based system. So if you follow the specific guidelines and rules, you've got certainty on whether or not you're going to be able to, get approved for the sites. And in the UK, it's completely different to that. It's kind of on the whims of, the planning officer who's involved. So when it comes to investment to build a building, there's a lot of risk, and people who otherwise might have committed capital to develop a project, knowing there's some certainty, maybe they're kind of worried to do so or they're a slightly smaller developer, and they don't have the kind of power and the people and the time in order to hold it to get the planning through.
Yeah.
So what's happening is this consultation is moving from the government's idea is to kind of digitalize the planning system. So at the moment, if you've ever been on any planning portal, like in any part of the country, and you see how many documents are uploaded in order to kind of get planning permission, I mean, it's confusing, and you almost need to have like a degree to figure out what's going on. For the public, there's not really a huge amount of transparency, and even for kind of council officers, it's a lot of information to digest. And in a world which is going digital, the government strategy now is to kind of digitalize everything. So one idea that they've got is, instead of having a list of 50, 60, 100 documents uploaded on a particular site that you have to digest in your own head to understand what's going on, digitalize it. So there'll be a digital map. For example, they're speaking to prop tech developers to have it a kind of a 3D version of what's going to be built, so it's very easy and transparent for people to see what's actually going on, rather than all of these documents, and somehow use data to kind of speed up the whole process, and also go to a set of kind of a rule-based system to get planning. All of this should kind of speed it up and bring it up to date with the 21st century. I mean, there's a good document that's on a government website. We'll put it on the link of the article so you can see. It's called Planning for the Future, and it's a consultation, and it just kind of roughly outlines what they want to do and how they want to shake up the industry, and kind of speed up and get Britain building again, as they say. So that's a little bit of positive news on the planning.
Very welcome, in terms of given the fact that planning has been one of those things that has held back a lot of developments taking place. So the government acknowledging this, that ultimately we're not really delivering. We've got all these targets about delivering X amount of homes by this amount of in the next 5 years, and every government that comes in, housing is always a big kind of play in the elections. But the reality is, with a planning system which is in many ways outdated, we're never going to be able to deliver those numbers and those objectives when it comes to housing. So we've got this shortage every year. We're not really hitting those targets. So them acknowledging that the planning system needs to be revamped is positive. But then again, this is just a consultation. It's the first step. It'll probably take more time for it to be developed and for it to actually come into effect, but at least the first step has been taken, where they acknowledge the fact that we need to do something in regards to planning. And obviously they brought out, they've eased some of the things about planning recently, so there's going to be more developers coming into the market, and they're trying to kind of get things going. I think we'll see a lot of commercial units being converted into resi a lot easier, so it is kind of positive. And we'll see quite a lot of interesting developments in that regards to planning and the residential market. Super good news in that regards. I'm going to finish up with another kind of consultation. So the Law Commission has been basically asked by the government to come up with proposals on how to reform the Lease Enfranchisement Act. And essentially this, you might have seen it in the news recently, this whole scandal about leaseholds, mainly houses being sold as leaseholds and ground rents doubling every 10 years, people essentially being trapped. And it was, in a way, they're looking at really very closely. There's an investigation ongoing at the moment. They're investigating, I think, 5 of the big developers in the country, and they're looking at the solicitors involved. They really want to get to the bottom of this situation where people have been sold or missold leasehold houses, and now in effect they're trapped. Because
when you say trapped, how do you mean trapped?
Well, for example, when it comes to selling the property, it's less attractive because you would assume that a house is freehold. So you as a buyer, you probably don't want to buy something that's leasehold. Lending as well is a big thing, right? Because mortgage lenders are not going to want to touch anything. They're not going to want to lend on anything that's leasehold.
That's the issue, isn't it? When something like this becomes a problem and the solicitors are aware of it and it's a general discussion kind of in the public domain, lenders get less likely to lend on these things. And that's what's happening at the moment. If you've switched on the radio and listened to what's going on, there's people telling you how they're worried that they're going to be able to remortgage. And I think the reason you say trapped is,
they're not
somebody takes a low kind of teaser rate of 2% for like a couple of years, 2-year fixed, and then let's say 2%, and then they realise it's now an issue because the ground rent's doubling. All of the lenders have decided, you know what, we don't really want to lend on these houses. You're kind of trapped and unable to remortgage. So at the end of the 2-year period, there is a risk that you're kind of going to be stuck with the same lender. And I was just listening to somebody literally on the radio the other day who was in exactly that position. I didn't say he was trapped for sure, but they were trying to sell the property because he was worried that they would be unable to remortgage, particularly now because lenders are much more strict than what they used to be with regards to lending. So it is an issue. The government's obviously picked up on it.
So they've commissioned the Law Commission to kind of come up with recommendations on how to reform this Enfranchisement Act. One of the things there's 102 kind of recommendations, so I'm not going to obviously be able to go through them all, but there are 2 ones that kind of they're very important given the context, especially with this kind of scandal for the leasehold houses. One is when it comes to lease extension. So now the law says if it's a house, it's a minimum of 50 years. That's guaranteed by the law that you can extend the lease. And for flats is 90 years, right? So you've heard us talk in previous episodes when we talk about lease extension, that the Lease Enfranchisement Act grants you, if it's a flat, a minimum of 90 years. Of course, you can try and negotiate more with the freeholders, but by law, you've got 90 years. So they're trying to bring that up to make it uniform and standardized. So it's 990 years, both for houses and flats. So now when you go to extend the lease, rather than saying you can only, you're guaranteed by the law 50 or 90 years, now it's going to be 900, they're trying to make it 990 years. And the whole point of this kind of report and the proposal is that they want to make it simpler, quicker, and more cost effective for leaseholders, essentially, because of this scandal where they've realized people have been kind of, they've been trapped in a situation that could end up them being repossessed, right? Because if your mortgage payments go up and then you've got crazy high ground rents and you're not able to pay for those, right?
And the property value has potentially gone down because nobody else can buy it with a mortgage, or nobody wants it.
It's a terrible situation to be in. So they're looking at this. So that's a positive thing. And also they're looking at how obviously the premiums that people can charge are more reasonable in terms of what people will be paid. So this
premium when you extend the lease.
So again, they're looking at ways to make it, like I said, simpler, quicker, more transparent, and more cost effective. Which, on the other hand, if you're a landlord, if you're a freeholder, in a way, it is controversial because a lot of these people have relied on ground rent, service charges, etc. to kind of, it's a good source of income. Like let's face it, ground rents are an incredible source of income for developers or landlords. So it is rather controversial from that perspective. But for leaseholders, they're definitely looking into this, and we probably will expect to see some kind of reforms when it comes to the enfranchisement, leasehold enfranchisement tax. So that's again very positive, because a lot of people, we speak with people and they get thrown off by lease extension and the process. They don't know how it works. They think it's very complex, and it can be very complex. And they don't even know that by law they've got the right to extend for 90 years, right? And in a way, when you're comparing second-hand properties with short leases, some of them, you've got new builds that now as standard come with a 999-year lease. So it's less competitive when it comes to second homes. So if they bring that kind of guaranteed by law threshold to 990 and they make it standardized, it's going to make even second homes rather competitive from that perspective. And the people that sometimes think, oh, I don't want to do a lease extension, although if you've got a good surveyor and a good solicitor, it's not an issue really, just a matter of extra paperwork that can be easily done. If these proposals actually end up reforming the act, it'll be a lot better for the industry, and I think people's confidence in buying flats for sure, because now leasehold houses are not a thing anymore because of this scandal. So again, quite positive that they're looking to reform this and make it better for people, especially given the fact that this type of ownership is quite unique to the UK. In Europe, if you buy a flat, there is none of this, leasehold, freehold situation in block of flats, and certainly not when it comes to houses. So we're taking a good step in that direction, and with the planning changes that hopefully will come into effect soon, these are things that will obviously support the housing market, make it better, and it will build people's confidence, whether it's an end user or an investor, to obviously play the property market. So all in all, very kind of two positive reforms that we'd be looking at here in terms of planning and the lease extension and lease enfranchisement act. And obviously with the activity and the stamp duty kind of holiday that we have until next year, it is an interesting time. It is busy. It changes from a weekly basis. Some days are quiet. Now September, we expect activity to go up again. But obviously caution, because we still have, we still got some choppy waters to kind of navigate over the next 3 to 6 months. But all in all, the property market has been active, and it's kept us busy. So yeah, that's it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week with more news and more developments, and hopefully we'll give you guys more valuable content. If you have enjoyed our podcast and you find it useful, or if you have any questions, by all means connect with us on our emails, and on our social media channels. The links are in the description, and we'll be happy to help and talk about any questions you might have. That's it for this week. Thank you for paying attention.
Have a good week.
I'll see you next week.